Hello and welcome to the circus.
Let's party every day, like there's no other way. Get drunk and play an extra show. We'll stay out every night and count the city lights till we go. There's no other way, 'cause it's all I know. 'Cause it's all I know. 'Cause it's all I know.
Mota Zitabanakis. Welcome into the worst interview show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. This is a special edition of the Worst Sports Channel where once a week we get to sit down with a content creator in the fantasy space. We ask about their lives, what drove them to begin playing and creating content, and so much more. Before we get started, this is a grassroots fan-driven project. You guys know it by now. If you have some unhinged ideas or stupid-ass questions, especially for the show, some degenerate would-you-rathers, if you will, you guys can always hit me up on Twitter at Jack Lucenay, or if you prefer something a little bit more low-key, you don't want your work email to see, go ahead, send that to worstsportschannel@gmail.com. Super very excited about today's show. We've got one of the main men from Generations Fantasy Football app. This is an app where you can play with every football player that's ever existed. No, there are some very minute limitations, but you are playing with Hall of Famers. So it is an amazing new app. I've got a league going myself, so I'm very excited to bring on the show today. I feel bad now playing a Boston Boys music for a New York homer, but welcome, Nick Uzzilia.
Thank you so much, Jack. I want to tell you, had me feeling like Macho Man for a second when the initial beat dropped. Loved it.
So that's why I wanted to mix them together. It's in honor of Generations. We brought the Macho Man in and the John Cena out.
I dig it.
Generations of goats in the wrestling world, and you've basically done the same thing for fantasy football, which I love. Before we even begin to talk about that, Nick, I got to know, what is the proper ratio of chugga to chew when you're making train noises?
So as the father of a 2-year-old and some change and listening to a lot of Thomases and a lot of different type of trains on YouTube, I'm going to go 4 chuggas to every 2 choo-choos. So it's a 4 to a half ratio.
I agree. I think a fast chugga, chew is the way to go. But I will say, in the story, as I remember it, maybe this is just me, maybe my parents just like put that little spice on it, but the chuggas used to get longer as the story would go. Like you start with a 4 chugga, choo. By the end of the story, that chugga is going all the way around the block.
That's because they wanted to make the book a little longer so they didn't have to read a second one. So they were trying to make it as long as possible, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, look, Generations Fantasy Football, we already talked about it a little bit. Because it's a newer app still, which is funny to say because of the content of it, I want to give you this platform. Tell us a little bit, first of all, how did it come about and what is it?
Absolutely. Really appreciate it. So Generation was a byproduct of the pandemic. Sports was very, very uncertain. Nobody knew what was going to happen next. Nobody knew what was going to happen. It was the first time any of us have ever experienced something like that. Sitting in my apartment, fantasy lover, sports lover in general, and said, how can we still enjoy sports when there's no sports? How can we still engage in something that is like the normal part of our life, at least for me, for like the last 20 plus years, and still do it? Had this crazy idea of trying to incorporate historical players from throughout the history of the NFL with current players, using historical data. Very grassroots, 30 for 30 ESPN kind of vibe. Called up my uncles, my cousins. Hey, let's go meet up at my cousin's house. Sat on the deck, had a piece of paper, had 3 randomizers, one to randomize players' week in their career, one to randomize the year and one for our draft picks. Had NFLreference.com up, randomized weeks and years of players' careers, manually changed those statistics into fantasy points, and played a bunch of fantasy leagues manually. And from that point, I said, you know what? I think we have something here, but wasn't sure. So I relied on a lot of folks in the industry who were willing to take their time to have a conversation. In the media, local media here in New York, some former NFL players, content creators, folks that own their own applications. And I always began every conversation asking them, tell me why this is the most horrible idea you've ever heard. Why is this trash? Why isn't this going to work? Give me pushback. Give me as much pushback as you want. You know, on top of hearing that it's a cool concept and all that stuff, what's wrong with it? So got a lot of that feedback, put it all together, and then made a lot of mistakes. Our founding team consists of myself and 4 other individuals who have 9-to-5s. We're all in the banking world. No tech background, nothing, never created an app before, just really, really loved fantasy. So we made a lot of wrong turns in terms of getting the app built, promotion, setting up the business, made a lot of mistakes. But over the last 5 years, those mistakes brought us to where we are today, where we actually do have a successful beta version of the application available for download and play on the App Store and Play Store. And going back to the actual concept itself. So that's basically our story on how we got to market. But the way it works is just like Jack was sharing. It's a platform where you could actually select your team from the greatest players from throughout the history of the NFL. So our first version that we have rolled out, there's about 400 or 500 players consisting of quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. And you create your team. You have a very traditional draft like you would on live fantasy that we all do every year. You have your team. Our algorithm then goes back and grabs a random week from that player's career, their actual statistics from a live game they played, and then we convert those statistics into fantasy points. And that's how your scoring works. Once the scoring is released, you're able to see what year and what week those statistics were drawn from. So you know it's legitimate and transparent, and these are actual statistics that this player put up on that given week. Again, a lot of bells and whistles coming down the line in terms of perhaps adding highlights from the actual scoring plays and things of that nature, having push button alerts, things like that. But we also self-funded. So we're in the space where we have a pretty cool looking app, again, especially for us putting it together ourselves with a lot of room for improvement. And we're really, really searching for user feedback. Shouting out Jack, he actually gave me some user feedback regarding availability in Canada. And that's something we're working on, inviting folks to a league. We're working on an improvement when it comes to that versus the system we currently have set up. So we're small enough to make changes. We're small enough to make things better. We're small enough to listen. So when a message gets sent our way, we're able to react and try to course correct as fast as possible. So apologize for being super long-winded, but that's the gist of where we came from, where we currently are. And if you don't mind me, I could even share where we're going, hopefully, knocking on wood.
Yeah, no, that's what this show is for, by the way, is long-windedness. So don't be afraid to expand on your answers. I love it.
Okay.
The less that I got a jabber on, the better for the listener, too.
I dig it.
So the one thing I'm going to cut in, though, before you tell us where you're going,
Yes,
we'll talk about it a little bit more. But me as a game tester, which is actually my job in real life, I test video games legitimately. It's funny because I always say my life is grandma's boy. I'm not obviously smoking weed during work. It's a big no-no. But still I do smoke. Obviously, that's like as soon as instead of a couple of beers when I'm done work, like it's a couple of joints. But as a game tester, I just got to say, and you kind of touched on it with the way that you approach it of tell me what's wrong with the thing. The way that you're so accepting of feedback, I can tell when that's a natural thing and when someone's just putting on airs. And I got to say, I really love that about you guys. You're almost thirsting for the errors and mistakes so that you can adjust. And I think that's fantastic. The availability thing in Ontario, which is such a weird thing for people that don't know, Ontario in Canada has like weird laws around fantasy football. So a lot of apps like Underdog is blocked. You can't use it there. For some reason, Drafters is fine, but then DraftKings is no. Generations got caught up in that where it's like it turned out it was a no, but they can change it into a yes.
Yep.
But it's just a weird. But the invite thing, I think, is a more basic concept of like, I don't like the invite system the way it's set up right now. And I told you that, and right away you were like, yeah, we're already aware, we're working on it. And I think that's beta testing is such a great concept in and of itself, but you really have to take it from the approach of like your shit don't stink. And you guys, again, as me as someone who, and I sign NDA, so I'm not going to name like the games that I work, but certain clients of games, for example, like they just don't care about the feedback. They're like, fix what we need fixed, and then that's it, right? You guys are like, no, tell us everything. Like, the games that do that, and the apps that do that always end up being the best ones. They have the best communities. They have people that genuinely care about their success. So I just want to say a credit to you and your team. I've had Imran on the show. I met the whole team when we were at the expo, and everybody is just very genuine. So I just wanted to say a credit to you guys and what you're doing there. But yes, tell us where you're going with this.
Thank you so much, Jack. And I also, just going back to your point before even getting to that, just the testing and everything. I'm a super, super big No Man's Sky fan. Been a No Man's Sky fan for years and years. And ever since they came out in 2016 and all the bugs that they had, and just the very difficult launch with their game kind of taught me a lesson regarding that, like owning up to things, having a community where folks do feel comfortable sharing what's going wrong and what's broken. And trusting that the people that are developing it are listening and course correcting with all the updates No Man's Sky has, the alerts. Hey, fix this. This is a bug report. This is what's happening. I kind of wanted to take that same approach. And it was inspired by seeing how No Man's Sky functions, Hello Games, how they function. So appreciate that. Definitely in the same vein as your thought with that. But the ultimate goal on where we're going, this was the initial idea. We used football as a means to test the theory out based on the popularity, and 69 million fantasy football users in the United States. You're not going to get a more welcoming community than that, and a larger audience in the fantasy world than in football. But ultimately, we want to make this a cross-sport platform, not only cross-sports where you could log onto the app and choose making a NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, WNBA, soccer league. No, we want cross-pollination. We want the user to be able to assign slots to a given sport based on their preferences. So you can have a league where you have 3 slots that go to the NFL, 2 slots that go to baseball, 2 slots basketball, whatever the case is. So you could have an amalgam league where you can have Ken Griffey Jr. on the same team as Tom Brady, on the same team as Michael Jordan, on the same team as Pele, if you want, because we're using historical data. So we're not beholden to live sports. So we could generate games and we could generate that historical data anytime we want. So that's our ultimate goal. Cross-sport platform, user owns the experience. User owns how long they want a league to go for, 52 weeks, 1 week, 1 day, when games start, all those things. It's more in the palm of your hand, and you don't have the restrictions that live sports puts on you. Not that live sports are bad. I love live fantasy. It's amazing. I'm in 4 or 5 different leagues right now. It's the lifeblood of what I do and where this whole idea came from. But this is a nice supplement to that.
You kind of just gave me a crazy idea.
Love it.
So this is I'm giving you your very distant future project. All right. So this is once Generations app is fully viable and successful. This is the project that you guys got to take on for me personally. Okay.
Yes, sir.
For years and years, I have seen bandied about in different corners of the internet ideas for a fantasy professional wrestling league. And the problem with that is you literally can't really do it with the live product because it just doesn't really it's because it's a scripted event and it doesn't really work the same way as sports, right? And the only thing that I think presents as a difficulty is accruing points besides wins and losses. But because of the algorithm of your app has the ability to generate past results. Like theoretically speaking, like if I pick Brock Lesnar or Stone Cold Steve, like it could generate like any random match from the past and accrue points based on the outcome of that match. And then you have so many wrestlers on a roster, boom, there's your game. So it's crazy how, you know, there are very few things that I feel like your app cannot touch on. It's almost the danger of you almost have to make sure you don't have too many SKUs where it's like you don't need to be out here doing like a generations cricket app.
But I'm going to tell you, we have some folks internationally that are interested in it, and cricket is one of the sports that came up just based on the popularity. I know India really big, Pakistan really big, the Caribbean is really big. So we actually were approached about something like that. And if I could jump into the idea you had about wrestling, one of our co-founders, Mike super big wrestling fan. I'm a fan as well. Grew up with it, 80s, early 90s, definitely super big fan. And we actually had an idea to bring that to the platform as well with a point system based on a random match from a wrestler's career. If they won, was there disqualification? Was there interference? And all of those things come up with some kind of point system for how that could generate.
Object. You need points for foreign objects for sure.
Blood spilling, like was there blood in the match? Or stuff like that.
It is a viable. That's crazy.
Absolutely, and again, the fan base is there, so it is open to any sport. And we have obviously, of course, we're using this as the testing ground to make sure that the idea is sound, the platform is functioning, and then design things. But knock on wood, once we get a check cut, we'll be able to scale it, build it out, and do all that good stuff. So still the early stages. Again, when we're talking on Twitter, we're talking on email, through the website, whatever the case is. You're literally talking to one of the five guys that are decision makers to make changes. So definitely, they always want some semblance of that being there. But like you said, we're just trying to get better. We're five regular dudes trying to learn and create something new.
I will say, if you're able to build that out, the fantasy football community is great, and it's gotten so big, since I guess the early days of fantasy football, but it pales in comparison. It is peanuts to the watermelons that is professional wrestling fans, and especially like content creators and the fans of content creators. Like, the numbers that they do are insane. And I'm like, even from personal experience, I dropped a top 10 face turns video, and like with very little advertising or anything. Like the wrestling thing is very much like the tertiary part of my channel. It's like, it's on the back burner in a sense. Even like now that football season's kicking in, I'm dropping it down to a bi-weekly show. And it did over 600 views, and it's still like just piling up. And yeah, it's not like that sounds small, but it's like I have a small channel, like, and so 600 views for that video. Like, I'm like, if I had gotten 16, I'd be like, oh, cool. 600 is insane. So I'm like, it's because, like I said, the sheer mass and number of wrestling fans. If you could get that actually working, like, honestly, I bet it would end up dwarfing even the fantasy football, which is crazy to say. The hockey one also really interesting to me as a Canadian and a big fantasy hockey enthusiast, I gotta say. The basketball, basketball is interesting because I think I just quit fantasy basketball this year because I'm sick of all the jabronis of this day and age taking off 20 games a year. Like, if I could play with Kobe and Michael, yeah, I might be more willing to get back in on some fantasy basketball.
And you can do that. And again, with the application, you can do it. And just to your point with the wrestling fans, another benefit of the wrestling route year round and with their schedules and everything and how hard they work and how often they work, you have that much more data to pull from and that many more matches to go from. You could have a wrestler that's been in the WWE, AEW, whatever the case is, TNA for 2 years, and you're talking about probably 400 matches or so.
Yeah, all the different companies that you can pull
Yeah.
from too, because it's just professional wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
And you could
but,
go back too. You could go to WCW. You could do TWA and all that stuff. You could go back as far as you want.
Yeah, well, and so that's you kind of are touching on the question that I'm dancing around. I said Michael Kobe, Hulk Hogan, and Macho Man from the '80s. Like we've touched on going back as far as like the NWA and all of those, old Bob Backlund and
Yeah.
what's his face?
Crossface Chicken Wing, Iron Sheik, all them guys.
I'm thinking of the guy who had the record. He's got the record.
Bruno Sammartino.
There it is. I don't know why I
Yep.
couldn't think of his name. Bruno. Back in those days, but it's like so. And shout out to Tip Major, and I know the sports affiliation has been really supportive. Greg Kellogg, obviously, he was the one that really introduced me even to this whole shindig with you guys. When I jumped in randomly on, I felt bad too doing it, but I jumped in on Imran's show. It was supposed to be an interview for Imran, and I was talking to Greg. I was supposed to jump in for like 5 minutes. I ended up just staying the whole episode because I was so interested. And then that's what led to me discovering you guys. But, shout out to Tip Major. He is Greg's co-host and just a genuine standout guy. He was with you guys and Greg for the press conference that was at the Fantasy Football Expo. Yep. So obviously not a lot of people got to see that. I was in the audience for it. One of the things I wanted to talk about on the show was something that Tip really kind of drove home during the conference, which was that the idea of bringing generations together, right? I think that is one of the most unique things about your app that is kind of almost overlooked is the fact like I could play this with my dad and my dad could draft like players from his generation that he loved. Like he could draft, I don't know if they're actually in the, but just for the sake of our, like Tommy Maddox and, or what? Why the fuck did I say Tommy Maddox?
Tommy Maddox. I was gonna say if that's your dad's generation, I'm an old dude.
Terry Bradshaw. Jesus
Okay.
It's the end of a long day for me. I'm very animated, but I'm fucking names up. Terry Bradshaw and like Lynn Swan and like just like that, like that generation of player. He could like play with those guys. I could be out here with my generation of like Hines Ward and Jerome Bettis, and we get to like go ahead. I think that's such a unique. So can you expand a little bit on, kind of what Tip had said at the expo of how it brings generations and families together?
Absolutely. And just a coincidence, side note before getting into that, I do have my Don Mattingly Simpsons shirt and my Yankee hat. Today was Yankee Old Timers Day. So took my son and my wife, and we went to go see Yankees Old Timers Day, saw the 2009 championship team. So again, going to the point of generations, that 2009 team, the late 90s team, I grew up with those teams, and that's my generation. Hopefully my son has a good stretch down in the future with the Yankees as well. Hasn't been the greatest in the last 15 years, but hey, there's another 15 years ahead of us. But to your point in terms of bringing the generations together, when I first brought the team together and the individuals together that we were testing manually, it was my father, a couple of my uncles, my brother-in-law, few cousins, and we really spanned generations. And when we were doing it, my father actually picked Terry Bradshaw as his quarterback. My uncle, late 70s, early mid 80s Giant fan, picked Mark Bavaro, and he was picking like those guys from the 80s and things like that. And it gave you an opportunity to relive a time in your life and players that made you feel a certain kind of way. Might not be the best strategy wise for winning and getting the most points on the board, but it does something for you where you could say, you know what? I grew up watching this player play, and I'm going to pick them on my team. I'm a Giant fan, but you know what? John Elway was probably my favorite quarterback growing up. I could pick Elway, and Elway's pretty comparable to the players of today. Rodney Hampton was my favorite running back. Got his autograph at a local high school when I was younger. Giant, great for us growing up. Got his autograph. Got him on my fantasy team. So it enables you to sit there and really relive your youth, relive your past, relive whatever's special about a player. You can relive that moment and actually have them on your team, which you've never been able to do, unless again you were playing live fantasy back then. But again, we're in such a different space today than we were in the 90s, in the early 2000s in terms of accessibility and how we play. And again, going back to the 70s, we had nothing like this. And 60s, we even got Jim Brown in the application. So that's something you're able to do as well. You're able to even play all decade leagues where you could have teams built with only players from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, and so on. You could have all franchise leagues where you could have teams made up of all one franchise, all Giants, all Steelers, all 49ers, all Jets, whatever the case is. So it really, everybody's team is a reflection of them, is a reflection of what you want to see on your team. You know you're going to get solid players, but what do those players mean to you? And again, being that it's based on historical data, you have a good chance of getting a good week when you're talking about the names that we have in this application. Greg picked O.J. Simpson was on his team, as well as Jerry Rice. And O.J., we all know, great football player throughout his career. Jerry Rice, best statistical wide receiver ever. I don't think that's arguable. But he had a few lean years when he played in the Seahawks and he played in the Raiders. So all of those games are encompassed in generations. So you might get a difficult game from Jerry Rice towards the end of his career where he gives you nothing. And Greg actually had a couple of those weeks in the last league that we played with him. But in the playoffs, he had OJ and Jerry Rice combined for 80 points. They gave him like 40-something apiece, two crazy games that they had in the same week. So, again, you're never going to be too far off. And if you pick with your heart, you're not making the worst decision in the world. Versus me picking Tracy from the Giants this year and Neighbors and having Daniel Jones as my quarterback might not be the best thing to pick with my heart right now. But when you're dealing with players from throughout the history of the NFL, you can't go too wrong no matter who you're picking on your team. And again, just a really, really good feeling. I would say the draft for me is the funnest part of the whole situation because you're looking at teams and you get upset when you have to settle. A real world example. We were in a draft a couple weeks ago and my cousin picked Calvin Johnson right before me. And I was so upset that I had to settle for Marvin Harrison. And that's crazy to me that I was angry that I was settling for Marvin Harrison. I had Terrell Davis as my RB, as I think a flex. And I was like, I got Terrell Davis, man. Like TD, one of the greatest, shortest careers in the NFL. Like, can't really go wrong with him. I was upset that I got Terrell Davis as a flex. So those are the kind of players that you're playing with. And again, you'll have moments that come up as you're selecting them where you're going to be like, I have this team, right? I have the Jim Kelly, Andre Reed stack. I have the Joe Montana, Terrell Owens stack, and so on and so forth. I have a Tom Brady handing off to Marshall Faulk. Like you have all these combinations that you could create based on what you love and what brings you the best feeling.
Yeah, I remember when we did our first run, which was I was in a 10-manner with Greg, and I remember I was my whole thing was I couldn't decide what quarterback. I felt like every day I was changing my quarterback around. It was like one day it was Dan Marino, and the next day it was Warren Moon, and the next thing you know is Fran Target. It's just like every day. It's funny because I'm like such a nerd for this stuff already. You talk about like doing drafts. I remember doing a draft legitimately online with some people where we did an all-time draft, but it was like we just put it like on paper and then we put it up on like Facebook and we had people vote who had the best team. And then it was just like, that was the winner. So I love that it's that same concept almost, but you're able to apply it to like an actual fantasy game. So I think that's crazy. But before we get into some more like specifics about the actual way the game works, let's stop off at our second hypothetical here. We've talked about generations. I threw this question out to my guy Disco, who is in the midst of a 24-hour draft-a-thon. Shout out to him. I'm going to be jumping on at 4 a.m. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But you're given tickets to any concert of any artist, past or present. Whose concert are you attending?
So I'm going to take artistic license with the definition of artist. And this is going to sound really weird. I'm not the biggest music fan. I grew up with a lot of musicians around me, so I listened to stuff they made, just because I knew where it came from. I saw it created, and I resonated with the people who created it. So that's kind of my wheelhouse when it comes to music. But I'm going to use Leonardo da Vinci as the artist I could observe, and I would go back in time and sit in his office space, whatever it is, his lab, and just watch him work and see how he created some of the concepts and ideas that he created. What was he doing? What was he on? What was he looking at? Like, what was his inspiration? How did he come up with that crazy helicopter looking thing that he has pictures of? The draconian man. I think that's what it's called. But you know what I'm saying? The guy with that's spread out with the three, like all those things. I'm curious to see how his mind worked, how a mind like his worked when he was in a time where so much of the technology and concepts and things that he was thinking about weren't even on the radar of anybody. But he had these ideas and he wrote them down and he explained how to create them without actually being able to create them. So I think that would be a really interesting thing to sit in and see.
This is why my show is called The Worst Interview. It's Worst Sports Channel. This is why I jokingly call myself the worst, and my guests are always the best. You know, shout out to Tip too. Every time Tip opened his mouth at the FF Expo, I'd like look at him like, this motherfucker, ocean, my guy, and you're dropping the same shit off your fucking Leonardo da Vinci.
Hey,
I want to know what my answer was. It was so fucking stupid. My answer is Inner City Surfers. So shout out to the guys that do the intro to this show and the intro to Worst Fantasy Show. They don't know it, but they're a local band from where I'm from in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And if I could go back to any show, I was there. It's the same show. I want to go back to just give me the Canadian, which was the name of the bar, and Inner City Surfers giving people dong bongs.
All right.
Beer bong with a cock at the end of it. And just people doing dong bongs in the crowd, and just because I love their music. You know, you can kind of get the vibe. It's almost like if country and punk had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
But their live shows, and this happens sometimes where it's like certain bands, performers, musicians, artists, however you want to define that term, when you see the production of their work, you're like, oh, that's amazing, that's incredible. But then you see them do it live, and all of a sudden they start like just free versing or like doing some crazy shit. I'm telling you, the fucking guitarist for Inner Cities, I've never seen anyone. This dude, like, already if you listen to the actual songs, you're like, oh shit, the guy on the guitar is like riffing like a motherfucker. And when it was live, it was like there were like 10 extra notes in between each like segment of the way he was playing. I was like, Jesus Christ. It was literally like watching the Charlie Daniels band, but like the fiddler guy, like if he came to life, but it was on a guitar. Like just watching this motherfucker like put the devil to shame, literally. Like I was like, God damn, this motherfucker is good. So it's crazy, and it's like I hear it in my brain sometimes, but I'm like, it's inaccessible anywhere else because it was just that one live show, right? Because again, he was like just kind of riffing off the cuff, doing his thing, and it was like, holy fuck, like, you know, the recorded thing is one thing, but like what he did that night was fucking magical, and I'll always remember that. So shout out to Inner City Surfers, but it's like, my answer was a cock bong, and your answer was
well, not. But see, that's the thing. When I was saying that with my digging music from people that I know created, it's that same energy and vibe you just have for them, where you actually saw it. And I super quick example of what I mean. I was a writer myself in my younger days with in music and things of that nature. And I went to the studio one day, and I walked downstairs to the actual studio. All the lights were off. There was one candle, and my buddy, who was the producer, was sitting there with the headphones on. He was at the board, and he was making a beat. Nobody around him. He didn't know anybody was in the room. I sat there and watched for 15 minutes, him adding different sounds, doing this, like going back, starting all over. And what he created in this very short amount of time and took it from absolutely nothing was astonishing to me. This is a guy who taught himself the piano, the bass, the drums, the piano, the keyboard, how to make music with never taking a lesson in his life from sound. And seeing somebody that creative doing something like that is just awe-inspiring. And again, I'm sure that there's so many talented artists out there that do the same, mainstream artists and things of that nature, but you connect with it a different way when you see it. Just like you with the band, when you actually saw it live, like there's just a different connection there. So that's why a lot of what I listen to has been that throughout my life. Just things that I actually saw get created that I'm like, wow, I know the work that went into that.
No, I love it. It's the appreciation of talent
Yep.
is really what it is.
Yep.
So we can get back into generations a little bit. I want to get into some of like the actual like mechanics of how it works. You kind of talked about it a little bit already. One of the things I love is I like how you guys have combined being a throwback, but with a lot of customization options. So like you kind of mentioned even just the idea of like, I love that I can run this thing. So the one that I've got coming up, shout out to, I was able to get 9 people to join me for a 10-man Generations League. We're going to kick it off. The draft is going to be on the 30th, and I'm running it just for a week, and it's to celebrate the opening of the NFL season. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, we'll be able to draft. It'll run through till like Monday when it's like the end of the first week of games. And at that point, I'm assuming people stop paying attention. But it's like, it was a perfect way to be like, hey, let's just celebrate, like, you know, NFL is back. And, you know, the way that I was able to, like I said, I was able to easily customize like the amount of players and the fact that I'm just running it for the 1 week. Like I love that we can draft, run it for a week, have a declared winner, and we are on our way. And, you know, you can run it longer. You can run it for, if you wanted to actually, you could almost run it to match the NFL season if you wanted. You could run it for 2-3 months, whatever you want. It'll do so many games. You could even do a full year format, which I think would be kind of crazy to do like an actual like full year of. You could almost call that like a dynasty league in a sense of like we're gonna run it 52 weeks. But yeah, so I like that. But again, when it comes to like the scoring and the roster construction, a lot of that is throwback. Now, I will say I want incremental scoring. I do want that. But I don't want you guys – I don't think you guys need to get so in the weeds of, like, super flex, for example. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey, if it comes up eventually, sure. But, like, I kind of like that. And I'm sure, like, you would have it set as different mode. I like the throwback mode of the roster construction – the way that it's just like the couple running backs and the wide, like I like that aspect where it's more traditional because that's a throwback to generations of fantasy football. But then, you know, like I was saying, like there are aspects. I love the way that you can mix the old and the new. So besides like what I just said, are there any kind of other examples that you can think of for the app where you guys are really combining like that old and new in terms of the game mechanics?
In terms of the game mechanics itself, the only additional things we'll add on top of what you just shared, definitely a customizable point system. So right now the points, they're basic points, 1 point for this one. We don't have like the fraction of points, again, just for the ease of rollout. We did just the basic scoring system. So we would definitely improve upon that as far as having PPRs and things like that. Greg Kellogg was very adamant about adding IDP, so throwing some defensive players in there and defenses as well. Again, just the logistics behind converting all that data into fantasy points was a little difficult off the bat. Same thing with like a super flex or something like that. But it is something that we would work on down the line and have incorporated into the system as well. In terms of adding players, it's almost going to have that generational kind of different vibe, different feel. So as you just mentioned, obviously with the live NFL season starting soon, Generation's still around, still playable. You do it on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Friday, whenever there's not football, or even when there is football if you dig it. But we know what's the main show during the season. It's live fantasy. So during our off season, we would sit there and tinker with it and play around with it. And come February, towards when the Super Bowl is happening, what we would have is an induction ceremony into Generations, where we would have a list of older players that we might not have in the application yet, as well as players who've hit the 3-year mark, and allow the community to select who they want in the application going forward for that year. So almost coincide with the Hall of Fame induction, it will be a Generations induction. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. Also, there's a 3-year wait period for players to join the application. Reason behind that is if you have a rookie season like Randy Moss or Christian McCaffrey did, you're picking that player if they're in our application because you know you're getting killer weeks every week. So you have to be in the league at least 3 years, or I believe it's play 35 games, one of the two, in order to be inducted or have the potential to be inducted into Generations, just so there's a big enough sample size where you know you could get a clunker, where you know there's going to be a week where so-and-so didn't go off for 35 points. They might have had a quiet week where they only put up 5. Maybe they twisted their ankle, strained a hammy in the first quarter and sat out the rest of the game as a precaution. Okay, cool. That's an off week. So we do backload all the statistics from the previous year into the application once the season's done as well. So you'd always get up-to-date statistics going forward. So that's one aspect and one update we're going to be making on a yearly basis also. Just adding players that we might not have caught along the way when we first implemented. We literally have statistics for every single player who's ever played in the NFL up into and including 2023. So we have all of those statistics. It's just a matter of inputting them in based on who the community wants to see in the application.
I think it's important to do that, not just because of the database, the data set that you need, obviously, to be able to run the game properly. But I also think, the idea that it's Generations, you shouldn't be able to be in on one rookie season. Like, you should have to wait till you're a veteran to be in the veteran bank, you know? Yep. So I kind of like that aspect of it. Before we move on, the one thing I also really love about the app, and like I was saying, with the mechanics, the players, and everything, it's very nostalgic. Which is weird for something new to be so nostalgic. It is like old Nintendo products in a sense of I think this is something that can really hold up. So I guess kudos and commendations for putting this together, because I've really enjoyed the short time that I've played with it. And I think again, with all what you guys have in store, I think it's just going to get better down the road.
Thank you very much. And going to the old school Nintendo adage that you just shared, you remember Tecmo Bowl?
Yeah.
Who's the unstoppable player in Tecmo Bowl?
It's wasn't it OJ in that one? Or
Bo Jackson.
Oh, Bo Jackson.
Bo Jackson. And Bo Jackson is available in Generation Fantasy Sports. So equating the two, we do have that kind of feel, that old school kind of feel where old is new. And it's something where, to your point, knocking on wood, hopefully it stands the test of time. And we're able to actually make this something that folks believe in. If I could just share just 2-3 quick things that we've received feedback on, that I'd love to just share and address. So one of them has to do with the strategy. And I think you and I might have spoken about this at the expo as well. I know I spoke with a few folks that the strategy that goes into our game, it's not a slot machine. It's not something where you just pick random players. Okay, stats are generated and that's it. Team construction matters. And again, I always go to the tight end position when I talk about this. The tight end position, there's not a whole heck of a lot of Travis Kelce's throughout the history of the NFL. Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, Gronk. There's a few. I named 4. You might be able to name 4 or 5 more that are even in the stratosphere of those guys.
Kellen Winslow is the only other one I could even think of, honestly.
Maybe Shannon Sharp, if you want to throw him in there, but it's not a lot. So when you're thinking about positions to lead with, you might go tight end round 1 because you know that I'm going to get a stud receiver, a stud running back, a stud quarterback, but I might not get this tight end. So maybe I want to lean into the tight end. Maybe I want to go QB round 2 or 3 because, yes, there's amazing quarterbacks throughout the history of the NFL, but there's only a few Patrick Mahomes, Peyton Mannings, John Elways, and players like that. So you might want to grab one of them earlier as well. Then when you think about the league itself and you say to yourself, okay, cool, I want the name. I want Jerry Rice. I want Terrell Owens. Great, again, can't argue with how great those players are. But those players that played for a long, long time, maybe a year or two too long, you have those games that are in the pool of not the greatest years mixed in with those other years. So do you want somebody who was a Megatron, who 10 years and out, a Marshall Faulk, consistent, great player, and then he was out? Like those kind of players might be the ones you lean towards. And for that, you have to do a little bit of research regarding their careers and what they did on a consistent basis. The second thing that I've received feedback on and thoughts, and I've said this before, and I'm going to continue to say it because I truly believe it in my heart. On a number of occasions, we went to a couple of conferences and, of course, the expo itself, and heard the word niche come up. And hey, this is cool, but it's a niche. And to that, I truly say, okay, cool. The NFL was a niche sport at one time in the United States of America. The NFL wasn't the NFL until it was the NFL. Fantasy was a niche before it wasn't. So all of these things that we think about as mainstream, as the top of the charts, the king of the industry, weren't until they were. And I'm not saying that our platform and concept is going to sit there and take over the world and all that stuff. I'm not saying that, but I feel niche, there's almost a connotation that this is only going to appeal to a small number of people, and it's not going to have broad enough appeal to be successful. And I take that as a challenge, as the guy who had the idea for it, because I truly believe in it. And I almost feel like when we engage with folks on X and we do have conversations with folks, I don't know if they believe it's real. Like sometimes I think when I post like a lineup, like my lineup that has Mahomes, Falk, Megatron, Randy Moss, Kelsey, Andre Reed, Terrell Davis, and whoever else was on my team. Like I almost think they think it's like a screenshot or it's like a made up thing or anything that you can't actually interact with. So overcoming that hurdle is something we're trying to do as well. But yeah, again, just you give me the platform. I'm just sharing what's on my mind about it because I'm super, super passionate about this concept. I'm passionate about how fun it is, how different it is, and the options that it's going to ultimately give folks to actually enjoy fantasy in a really different way.
I gotta say something about that too, because sometimes I feel like as a Canadian, and not just a Canadian, but living in French Canada, I feel like an outsider a lot of times. Like hilariously at the expo, I didn't know who JJ Zachariason was. I seen him, and he was talking to Joe Bryant. I thought it was Joe Bryant's son. Like I just thought, oh, Joe Bryant brought his kid to the expo, and he's also a fantasy analyst. That's nice of him. But because of something like that, it's funny to me when you're like, they told me it was niche. Like people were saying it's niche. I feel like, motherfucker, look around. This whole thing is niche. Actually, I think what you do is less niche than just straight fantasy football because, like, the olds, as I would say, like, look, I tried getting my dad into fantasy football, and he frankly did not give a shit. I couldn't get the man to manage his team for half the year. He's got better shit to do. Like, he's old school. There's no way. But if I got him on Generations and he was like, oh, I can access, like, players that I grew up with, where, like, again, you talk about that nostalgic factor, I bet he would be way more in on it. Like, I bet I could get him to genuinely participate, where it's like, I think when you're so in the bubble of fantasy football and you're at something like the expo that seems so grandiose with so much gravitas, it's easy to forget, like, nah, this shit's actually, like, really small. Like I said earlier, the wrestling community dwarfs the fantasy community. And I think, again, me as an outsider, I'm able to see that. Whereas, like, I think people who are, like, really in that bubble don't always see it. So to them, they're like, oh, I don't know if you can get as big as fantasy footballers, but it's like, okay, but it's not what we're even doing here. You know what I'm saying? So
Yep.
like, I totally agree with you that, the niche is as big as you fucking want it to be. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's I got two more questions for you before we hit the draft.
Yes, sir.
This one's a little bit loaded. I want to know, who are your top 5 quarterbacks of all time?
Top 5 quarterbacks of all time. Very chalk laden selections, but it's who I truly believe are the best. Are there others that I would put up there if I was just talking with my heart? Probably so. In order, I'll give you best to the 5th. I think I would go definitely Brady, Montana, Brady, Montana, and I'm going back and forth. I guess I would go Manning for the regular season and the postseason. Combine Elway and Mahomes. And if you want to flip flop Mahomes and Elway, I'd be cool with that. And I'm sure Mahomes probably will finish even further up the ladder by the time it's all said and done as well. Just didn't want to have super currency bias and put him above like a Manning or even an Elway right now, even with 3 rings, potentially a 4th on the way. It just felt too soon. But if you were to sit there and say, I got Mahomes as number 3 behind Montana and Brady, I wouldn't sit there and get mad at you.
Well, you won't get mad at me then, because I have him number 3.
Yeah.
I have Brady, Montana. I think those two are locked in as kind of the de facto 1A, 1B.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have Mahomes. I think Mahomes legitimately could surpass Montana, but not Brady.
I agree.
I mean, he could surpass Brady, which would be fucking insane.
He's young enough, but that would be a long wait. 10 Super Bowls is a lot. 7 wins, 10 being in 10.
Yeah, that I don't know if he gets to that level. I also just don't know if like he is as psychotically obsessed with the game as Brady. That's what made Brady like Brady. But I have it Brady, Montana, and then I have Mahomes, and then I really struggle with. I feel like Manning and Elway get pushed up because of the Super Bowls. I don't think either of them was as good as Dan Marino. I actually have Dan Marino, in spite of never winning a Super Bowl. I have him at 4, and Manning's the one that I think Manning for me is like the honorable mention. Like to me, he's at 6, and I would have probably Elway at 5, because I do think Elway, with what he could do from a physical standpoint and what he was able to do late in his career, I think is enough for him to be just over. I think Manning is one of the most overrated quarterbacks of all time because of the complete flops in the playoffs. Like he didn't win the Super Bowl that the Broncos won. The defense won that game.
They got spanked the year before, 2 years before when they played.
Smoked by the Seahawks. And just historically, Manning always kind of looked rough in the playoffs. And yeah, he was great with the. Like, I feel like if you are supposed to be the best mental quarterback of all time, but you always lost to the actual best mental quarterback of all time, but then it's like you're also not the most physically gifted, it's like, yeah, to me, you're overrated. I think he was excellent. This isn't me. I feel like I'm talking shit about Peyton Manning because he is obviously one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever live. But compared to, like, the other 5 greatest to ever live, like, that's where I'm like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, but I think I got you at 6. Because I think, like, mentally, to me, you're obviously behind Brady, and physically you're behind all these other guys. I could argue that, like, Montana also a bit overrated, but with the San Fran system and with Jerry Rice and with the 4 Super Bowls, like, you can't really argue against it. But, like, it's like Manning had the same thing. He had amazing coaches, and he had Marvin Harrison his whole career, basically. And it's like, yeah, and he only won 1 with the Colts, and it was against Rex fucking Grossman. And then the Broncos defense carried you to a 2nd Super Bowl. Like, Eli's got as many as you do. Like, come on, bro.
I wouldn't disagree with any of the points you made. If I could counter and just for conversation purposes, Dan Marino he was my number 6. I feel Dan Marino, as crazy as it sounds, would be better today than he was in his. Dan Marino would be Mahomes. If you gave Dan Marino and put him on Miami today, Waddle, Hill, and Odell Beckham, and Dan Marino at QB, they're winning the Super Bowl.
Realize, put Marino just in fucking Peyton Manning and Tom Brady's generation. He would have all the records.
Absolute, 100%. So again, not taking anything away. He was my 6. I just like Manning. The playoffs, undoubtedly, you're right. Like there's no counter to that. You could sit there and cherry pick games, and you could talk about the 2 Super Bowl runs. His regular season, like consistency, was unreal. Like he was, and again, that's where the balance comes. And to your point earlier, when you said I feel like I'm talking crap about Peyton Manning, it's wild that when we think about when we're having debates, like we're slighting somebody. It goes to the LeBron, thinking of basketball, LeBron and Michael Jordan. I'm saying LeBron is the 2nd greatest basketball player of all time. I'm not saying he's trash. MJ to me is the greatest. LeBron's the 2nd greatest. Cool. Not disparaging anybody. You're saying Peyton Manning is the 6th greatest quarterback of all time. That's pretty good. Like you're just about on Mount Rushmore. You're okay.
Still a top 10. Like it's like, oh yeah, there were 5 other guys in the history of all of football that I thought were better. Like,
exactly. And I think that sometimes we overthink it, but like in the sports debates, but that's also the world that we love, is folks talking crap about stuff that there's really going to be no answer to. It's really based on how you feel, because you could believe one thing, I could believe the other. I could support what I believe, you could support what you believe, and we're going to end up at where we were when we began with a great debate or a great conversation preceding it.
It's negativity sells. That's why I'm like, I don't want it to sound like I'm like hating on Peyton Manning, but it's it's such a ridiculous debate. But anyways, before we get into the draft, just quickly, we'll hit the last hypothetical that we had on the doc here, because I thought it was really funny, actually. The way it's phrased normally is a little different from how I actually put the question. So, would you rather have the ability to talk to animals, but they only insult you, or be able to speak every human language, but only in sing-song rhymes?
Oh, give me sing-song rhymes. I love it. I'll make that sound good.
Annoying. Oh my God. I guess it depends how you hear it in your head, because when I hear sing-song rhymes, that's not like, to me, like you're not rapping, like you're not doing anything cool. You were doing nursery rhymes. This is like everything you say sounds like you're singing it to your children.
I'll do it. I'll make that sound good. I'd rather that than just get constantly insulted. I'm gonna look at the squirrels in my backyard, and the squirrels.
Bro, I'm taking the insults. You know why? Because first of all, I have super thick skin. Like, you could say the darkest shit to me, and I'm gonna think, I'm just gonna I'm like in my head, I'm like, oh, that was a good one, I'm gonna use that. So to me, the animals are now just providing me extra content for my comedy and for my show, because I'm like, oh, the animal's gonna like call me some shit I never heard of, and I'm like, what the fuck was that?
That's that bear humor.
Like, next thing I know, I'm gonna be out here like, you fucking nut tosser. All right, let's get into the draft.
Okay.
I want my picks back, all of them. You pancake eating motherfucker.
So this is one of my favorite drafts that I've set up so far. We're drafting the best TV dads in a fight to the death. So we're going 5-on-5. We're going back to the Gladiator arena, and we're choosing the best TV dads. You can be as open with it as you want, animation included, just so everyone is clear on that. But yes, we'll start with, we're going to do a linear draft. The guest always gets the first choice, and then we'll go back and forth until we have our team of 5. So, Nick, who is going to be your 101 in the arena?
101, no doubt. I'm a little bit of a nerd kind of dude. I love sci-fi. I love all that stuff. So I'm going Dr. Manhattan, the Watchmen HBO show. Dr. Manhattan, 1 of 1.
Oh shit! I didn't realize. I didn't realize he was really a father. I guess.
I even Googled it just to make sure. They had 3 adopted kids on the show.
Okay. My again. Yeah, this is where it's like you're such a deep thinker. I love that you're first thinking Dr. Manhattan. My pick, when you hear it, you're gonna be like, "Yep, that's very on par." I'm going with Peter Griffin.
All right, hey,
You
nothing wrong
fought
with
the
that.
chicken so
I
many
dig it.
times. I've watched this man fight to the death and just walk away from it into the sunset like 17 times. He's got cartoon powers. I'm going with Peter Griffin.
I dig it.
Overall.
Okay, I'll counter Peter Griffin, and I'll raise you a Goku.
Oh shit! Okay, now it's getting serious. Okay, well, now when you said counter, I thought you were going to say Homer Simpson.
Oh,
Now
you
I'm
know
like,
what?
oh,
I figured
fuck.
when I was wearing the shirt, but that's not a clue. I don't think I have Homer on my list. I might, but I don't think I do.
No, that's all right. Oh shit! Now I definitely have to counter that. Oh my god. Okay. Jesus Christ. Ooh. Oh. Okay. Duh. I'm gonna go with Batman.
Okay. Did Batman have kids? Yes, he did have kids. Yep.
Yeah, Damian Wayne,
Yep.
famously.
Yes, he did.
He finds out. So I love the way that story unfolds. Shout out to DC Animated Universe, but basically Talia al Ghul had Bruce Wayne's baby, didn't tell him about it till the kid was like 12 years old, then dropped him on his doorstep after Ra's al Ghul got killed by Deathstroke, and then Damian Wayne ends up staying with Bruce Wayne and becoming the new Robin. He's like the third, or I think he's the third Robin.
And then doesn't he become a version of Batman too?
Yeah, at some point. But yeah, Batman, famously a dad. So I'm gonna go with that.
I'm gonna go with one of the biggest father turns in the history of cinema / TV because he was on 3 TV shows as well. Darth Vader.
Oh, yeah, your team.
That's a squad right there. I got a squad right there.
Pretty deadly right now. All right, I kind of punted because I figured he would make it back to me.
Don't say it.
I'm like
Because I think we might have one common one.
Okay, well, I mean, like I can't be going without a Dragon Ball Z character.
Okay,
you have one. See, that's where I'm like, I'm gonna kind of. I feel like it's a little bit of a lesser pick, but I think his anger is really gonna work well with Batman. So I'm gonna actually take Vegeta here.
Can't go wrong with Vegeta. Right on par there.
Vegeta's my guy. I mean, boom. I can't fucking point. Boom. There's my guy right there, Vegeta. I've got Kid Goku over here, but yeah, I grew up on Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. That was my shit.
Me too.
So, when you took Goku, I was like, fuck. Now I've got. I was like, I could take Piccolo, who's a better father than him, but no, I'm gonna go Vegeta. Yeah. I feel like every time Goku hits a level, it pisses Vegeta off, so he gets there just a little bit later.
Yep, and does his own little spin on it.
Yeah.
I will go. I need some honor on my squad, and I need somebody to kind of be the strategic leader, even though he wasn't that good at strategy. I'm going Ned Stark.
Ooh. I thought about him, and I was like, the motherfucker got his head chopped off season 1. I don't want him.
Got a little too much honor.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You can't be so honorable that you're just out here getting chopped off on season 1 out of 8. My guy. That was a main family, too. Okay. I'm all over the place. I want this guy on my team, but I think he's going to make it back to me at the next pick, so I'm going to let him simmer. Holy shit. I'm on the struggle bus here. I'm full tilting right now. This is a situation where the pick that I have further in ADP, because I know what it is and I can't decide what this one is, I'm going to actually take that one first while I decide what the fuck to do with this last pick. So not a fighter per se, but he is going to be a cheerleader for our team. and he's going to try and kill you guys with positivity. I'm going with my guy Phil Dunphy.
Respect.
Modern Family. I just want Phil Dunphy on the team. He's a problem solver. He's a cheerleader. I think he's really underrated, so I just wanted to make sure I had him on the team.
Okay, and you have your dad funding the whole operation in Batman. I need some money. We got Dr. Manhattan, kind of a low-key kind of dude. Darth Vader, Palpatine's little side guy. We don't really have the money behind everything. I'm going Mr. Drummond from Different Strokes to fund the whole operation. Mr. Drummond at number 5 to be the money behind everything and bankroll the whole operation.
Okay, I fucking love that you said that because you helped me decide my last pick.
Okay.
And it's so perfect because when you said again, this was like earlier when you were like, I'm going to counter, and then I got scared. You started talking, I got scared again. And then you said Mr. Drummond, I was like, okay, we're safe. So with my last pick, this is definitely an ultimate sleeper. I'm going with Walter White.
All right.
That's how we're going to bankroll our operation with some fucking crystal meth, my guy.
Let's go, so Bryan Cranston.
Heisenberg. Walter White as my final pick here. And he's gonna obviously be able to like come up with like some schemes and shit. I think I have a very strategic planning team. I'm hoping that between Batman especially always has like a contingency plan. Like he'll figure it out. But between Batman and Walter White, I think they can access the hilarity of Peter Griffin and Phil Dunphy combined with the seriousness of Vegeta to do some damage. But man, your team, Dr. Manhattan, Goku, Darth Vader, just those three alone, those are some heavy hitters. Ned Stark, he's going to be the sacrificial man, obviously going to be the first to die here. And Mr. Drummond, he's like, you know who Mr. Drummond is? He's fucking.
I know what you're gonna say. The guy from Family Guy.
No, I was gonna say he's in the Joaquin Phoenix role of he's up in the stands doing this shit.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna compare him to like the weird dude in Family Guy, the old guy that's always doing some
fucking Herbert the pervert.
That's yes.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say no. He's up like Joaquin Phoenix doing this shit because he's not really great in the battle. Yeah, he's funding everything. So that's why he's up here giving the thumbs up, thumbs down. Oh, man, Nick, I got to give you the thumbs up because this was an incredible show. Let's get the hell out of here. We're running a bit over, and I appreciate your time. Let's get your shout-outs before we get out of here. This is other content creators in the space supporting Generations, the other guys from Generations, or whoever you want to shout out right now. Go for it.
Yep, got our squad. We got Imran, Chris, Mike, and Mike. Shout out to you guys. Love you, dudes. We got Tip. I know you mentioned him before. Tip Major, Greg Kellogg, the Thursday Check Down podcast that they do, the whole Cookout community, the great Chris Allen, Bob Lung and the Fantasy Expo, Ed Williams over at the FSGA and the entire FSGA family, Jorge Martin and the Familia FFB podcast, Todd and Joe from Extreme Fantasy Sports, and of course my guy Jack putting us on and showing us love throughout the whole process, and again giving us his feedback to get better. And again, take all this stuff from a good place. So if anybody out there has feedback, thoughts, questions, please reach out to us. Tell us how it's working. Tell us why it's not working. Tell us what you like and don't like. We're here to listen and improve every day.
That's why I love doing what I do, is because when I find stuff that I genuinely love, like Generations Fantasy, it's like I get to, hang out with you guys at the expo and have you guys on the show and shoot the shit. So it honestly, genuinely, like these are the greatest experiences that I get to have as a content creator. So I super appreciate you and the whole team and coming on the show. I will be collecting heads as I gather the rest of the Generations team.
Yes,
that's why, ironically enough, when I did the thumbnail at the beginning, I had a picture of us, and I was like, no, I'm going to use the one of the team because I'm lazy, and then I can reuse the same thumbnail over and over. But man, you guys are all fucking amazing. So to you guys out there, if you're watching or listening, I super appreciate you guys. You guys are amazing as well. Please download and sign up to Generations app. If you make a league, hit me up on Twitter. I will join all of your Generations leagues. I don't care how many, because they're like ancillary and so much fun. And as long as I keep them all on one app, I'm good like that. Like I actually kind of got 24 leagues this year, Dynasty and Redraft combined, but they're all on Sleeper, every single one of them. If it's NFL or Yahoo or ESPN, I told them all go fuck themselves. I'm a Sleeper boy through and through. So all of them are on. So as I can have 20 leagues, but they all got to be on one app. So as long as it's all, I don't care if there's 20 of you out there that make leagues, hit me up. I will join your leagues anytime it's Generations. So super appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe, download the app again. Generations Fantasy Football. That's how you search it. Don't just put Generations. It won't come up. Generations Fantasy Football. It'll come up. Download the app. It's great. Nick, thank you again for being on the show. Until the next time, y'all, I will catch every single one of you on the flip side.
Thank you, sir.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes